Psychology facts to relax your mind before sleep. Deep science sleep. Welcome to Deep Science Sleep. Today we talk about psychology facts to relax your mind before sleep. Picture yourself settling into the softest, most comfortable space imaginable. The weight of the day is lifting from your shoulders like morning mist evaporating in gentle sunlight. Your breathing naturally slows, deepens, becomes rhythmic and easy. The room around you dims into perfect twilight, that golden hour between wakefulness and dreams where everything feels possible and nothing demands urgency. Your body sinks deeper into comfort with each passing moment, each gentle breath, each slow heartbeat carrying you further into tranquility. Tonight, we're going on a journey through the peaceful landscape of the human mind, exploring the gentle science of why we feel the way we do, discovering calming truths about consciousness, connection, and the beautiful complexity of simply being human. Let these soothing psychological facts wash over you like warm water, each one a small gift of understanding, each insight a stepping stone toward deeper rest. Section 1. The Science of Relaxation and Sleep. How our brains find peace. The human brain possesses an extraordinary capacity for self-soothing, a sophisticated internal system designed specifically to guide us from the chaos of waking consciousness into the sanctuary of sleep. This isn't magic or wishful thinking. It's neuroscience, pure and elegant, unfolding in your skull right now as you read these words, as your eyelids grow heavier, as your muscles gradually release their tension. When we begin to relax, something remarkable happens in the architecture of our neural activity. Scientists studying brainwaves have discovered that relaxation techniques create specific patterns in our brain's electrical symphony, particularly an increase in what researchers call theta waves. These theta waves, oscillating at frequencies between 4 and 7 cycles per second, represent the brain's gentle transition from the beta waves of active waking thought into the deeper states of rest and restoration. Think of theta waves as the brain's way of downshifting, like a car moving from highway speed into the quiet neighborhoods of sleep, where everything moves more slowly, more peacefully, more dreamlike. Research conducted over decades has shown that when people practice relaxation techniques before bed, their central nervous system arousal decreases measurably. This isn't subjective comfort we're talking about, though comfort certainly accompanies it. This is observable, quantifiable change in the body's fundamental operating systems. Heart rate slows, blood pressure drops. Stress hormones like cortisol, which spike during our busy daytime hours, begin to recede like ocean tides pulling away from shore. The brain regions responsible for worry and planning, particularly areas in the prefrontal cortex, quiet their constant chatter. The amygdala, that ancient alarm system deep in the brain that keeps us vigilant for threats, receives gentle chemical messages that danger has passed, that safety has arrived, that rest is not just possible but appropriate. Deep within your brainstem, a peanut-sized cluster of cells called the hypothalamus orchestrates your journey into sleep. This tiny conductor of your brain's sleep orchestra produces a neurotransmitter called GABA, which acts like a volume knob turned down on consciousness. GABA gently inhibits the firing of neurons, reducing the brain's overall activity, creating the neural equivalent of dimming lights in a theater before the show begins. When we consciously engage in relaxation, we're essentially working with our hypothalamus, helping it do what it was designed to do, what it wants to do, what it's been doing since before we were born, guiding us into restoration. The transition to sleep follows a predictable, beautiful pattern that scientists have mapped in exquisite detail. Stage 1 sleep, that drowsy threshold we cross without quite noticing, lasts only a few minutes. During this fleeting window, alpha waves gradually give way to theta waves, and we might experience strange, brief sensations like falling or sudden muscle jerks called hypnic jerks. These are completely normal, just the body's way of calibrating its shift from movement to stillness, like a machine powering down with a final harmless spark. Then comes stage 2, where we spend more time than in any other sleep stage throughout the night. Here, our heart rate slows further, our body temperature drops slightly, preparing for the deep restoration ahead. The brain produces sudden bursts of rapid brain wave activity called sleep spindles, which researchers believe help protect our sleep from disruption while simultaneously processing and consolidating the day's experiences. These sleep spindles are your brain's way of filing away memories, sorting important information from trivial details, organizing the vast library of your experiences into coherent patterns that will serve you tomorrow and all the tomorrows after. Stage 3 brings the deep, slow-wave sleep that our bodies crave. This is where growth hormone pulses through our bloodstream, where cellular repair accelerates, where the immune system strengthens its defenses. Brain waves slow to their most synchronized, lowest frequency. If someone were to try to wake you during this stage, you might feel disoriented, groggy, pulled from depths that resist surfacing. This is not light sleep. This is profound rest, the kind that makes morning feel like a resurrection, a rebirth into a new day with renewed energy and clarified thought. REM sleep, that final stage where most vivid dreaming occurs, brings its own fascinating qualities. Despite its name suggesting rest, the brain during REM sleep becomes almost as active as it is during wakefulness. Your eyes dart back and forth behind closed lids, tracing the contours of dream landscapes only you can see. Your voluntary muscles become temporarily paralyzed, nature's brilliant solution to prevent us from acting out our dreams and potentially hurting ourselves. Meanwhile, your brain processes emotions, consolidates procedural memories, and creates those bizarre, sometimes meaningful, often confusing narratives we call dreams. Memory consolidation during REM isn't just storage but creative synthesis, your brain making unexpected connections between disparate pieces of information, sometimes solving problems that stumped you during waking hours. What makes all of this even more remarkable is how accessible these states are. You don't need special equipment or pharmaceutical intervention to experience these natural cycles. Your body knows the way. It's traveled this path every night of your life. The brain's sleep-promoting mechanisms aren't something we must create, but something we must simply allow, like opening a gate that was always there, waiting for us to stop resisting and finally walk through. Researchers studying relaxation's effects on sleep have found that even brief periods of intentional calming can dramatically improve sleep onset and quality. One study tracking people with chronic insomnia discovered that those who practiced simple relaxation techniques showed brain wave patterns during relaxation that closely resembled the early stages of sleep itself. It's as if relaxation and sleep exist on the same continuum, one flowing naturally into the other when we remove the obstacles we've unconsciously erected. These obstacles often take the form of what sleep researchers call cognitive arousal, that racing mind that reviews the day's failures, rehearses tomorrow's challenges, and generally refuses to quiet down. When we engage in deliberate relaxation, we're essentially giving that busy mind something else to focus on, redirecting its energy from worry to awareness, from planning to presence. And in that shift, something beautiful happens. The harder to reach parts of our consciousness, the creative and intuitive regions that operate below the threshold of active thought, begin to emerge. We start to drift, to float, to let go. The beauty of this process is that it gets easier with practice. The neural pathways involved in relaxation strengthen each time we use them, following a principle neuroscientists call use-dependent plasticity. Your brain literally reshapes itself around the activities you repeatedly engage in. Each time you choose relaxation over restlessness, each time you guide yourself gently towards sleep rather than forcing it, you're carving deeper channels in your neural landscape, making the journey to sleep a little smoother, a little more natural, a little more like coming home. Section 2. The psychology of comfort and safety, why we seek soft spaces. Human beings are creatures of attachment, wired from birth to seek safety, comfort, and the presence of caring others. This isn't weakness or dependence. It's evolutionary wisdom coded into our DNA. A survival strategy so successful that it helped transform vulnerable primates into beings capable of art, science, and contemplation. Understanding this need for comfort can itself be comforting, a reassuring reminder that our desire for cozy spaces and peaceful moments isn't frivolous but fundamental. The pioneering work of psychologist John Bowlby and researcher Mary Ainsworth in the mid-20th century revealed something profound about human nature. Through careful observation of infants and their caregivers, they discovered that attachment isn't just emotional niceness but a biological imperative. Babies who received consistent, responsive care developed what Ainsworth called secure attachment, a foundational sense that the world is safe, that others can be trusted, that distress will be met with comfort. This early programming doesn't simply disappear when we grow up. It continues to influence how we seek comfort throughout our entire lives. Think about what you do when you're stressed or scared. Maybe you call a friend. Maybe you wrap yourself in a favorite blanket. Maybe you retreat to a familiar place where you feel protected. These aren't random behaviors. They're extensions of that early attachment system, still operating in your adult brain, still seeking the safety that once came from a parent's arms and now comes from other sources we've learned to trust. The warm coffee cup you cradle in both hands, the well-worn book you reread for the 100th time, the ritual of checking that the door is locked before bed. All these connect to our deep, ancient need for security. Neuroscience has illuminated the biological basis of this comfort-seeking behavior. When we feel safe and comforted, our brain releases oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, though its effects extend far beyond social connection. Oxytocin reduces activity in the amygdala, that vigilant alarm center we mentioned earlier. It enhances our sense of trust and connection while simultaneously lowering stress responses throughout the body. When a mother holds her infant, oxytocin floods both their systems, creating a feedback loop of comfort. When we snuggle under soft blankets or stroke a pet's fur or listen to a loved one's voice, similar chemical cascades occur, our adult brains activating the same soothing systems that once responded to parental care. The environments we create for ourselves tell a story about our attachment needs. Consider how carefully many people design their bedrooms, these intimate sanctuaries where we're most vulnerable. Soft lighting that mimics twilight. Comfortable temperatures that neither chill nor overheat. Familiar objects arranged within easy reach. These aren't arbitrary preferences but expressions of our psychological need for a secure base, a protected place from which we can venture out into the world and to which we can return for restoration. Environmental psychology research has documented how certain features make spaces feel safer and more comfortable. Having a view of entrances and exits satisfies ancient vigilance needs while allowing us to relax, knowing we can see potential threats approaching. This is why window seats in restaurants fill first, why corner tables are prized, why we instinctively position furniture to command views of doorways. We're still carrying the perceptual habits of our ancestors who needed to spot predators and escape routes. But now we satisfy these needs in ways that increase comfort rather than simply ensure survival. Texture plays a surprisingly important role in our sense of comfort. Soft fabrics, smooth surfaces, gentle materials all send signals through our skin's thousands of nerve endings to our brain's sensory processing centers. Research has found that physical softness literally translates into psychological perceptions of safety and comfort. When we touch soft materials, our nervous system interprets this as a sign that the environment is benign, non-threatening, suitable for letting our guard down. This is why blankets and stuffed animals comfort not just children but adults too. Why weighted blankets have become popular for reducing anxiety. Why the texture of bed sheets matters more than we might rationally expect. The concept of a transitional object, first described by pediatrician and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott, helps explain why certain objects become imbued with such powerful comforting properties. A transitional object might be a worn teddy bear for a child or a favorite coffee mug for an adult. These objects represent a psychological bridge between complete dependence on others for comfort and the ability to self-soothe. They're not the person who provided safety, but they symbolically represent that safety, allowing us to carry a piece of security with us even when we're physically alone. Many adults maintain relationships with such objects throughout their lives, though we might not always recognize them as serving this function. That lucky pen, that particular sweatshirt, that playlist we listen to when we're stressed, all might be serving as adult versions of transitional objects, helping us access feelings of comfort and safety. The evolutionary perspective adds another layer to understanding our comfort seeking. Our ancestors faced genuine physical dangers, predators that hunted at night, hostile environments where exposure could kill, social banishment that meant certain death. Those who successfully created and sought out safe spaces, who bonded with protective others, who developed strategies for reducing vulnerability, these individuals survived to pass on their genes. We are their descendants, carrying neural circuits shaped by millions of years of this selective pressure. When we pull the covers up to our chin or close the curtains against the dark or lock our doors, we're enacting rituals of safety that echo through evolutionary time. But comfort isn't just about physical safety. Psychological safety matters just as much, sometimes more. Feeling psychologically safe means believing you can be yourself without fear of judgment, rejection, or punishment. It means knowing that mistakes won't lead to catastrophe, that vulnerability won't be exploited, that your essential worth as a person isn't constantly being evaluated and potentially found wanting. Creating this sense of psychological safety in our own minds, becoming what therapists call a secure base for ourselves, represents a form of emotional maturity that many spend years developing. The practice of self-compassion, which we'll explore more deeply later, connects directly to this idea of being your own source of comfort and security. When we learn to treat ourselves with the same kindness we'd offer a frightened child or a hurt friend, we're essentially becoming our own attachment figure, our own source of soothing in moments of distress. This doesn't mean we stop needing others. Humans are fundamentally social creatures, and connection remains essential throughout life. But it does mean we develop an internal capacity for comfort that doesn't entirely depend on external circumstances or other people's availability. Research on secure attachment in adulthood shows that people who feel securely attached in their relationships, who trust others will be there when needed, experience lower anxiety, better physical health, and more resilience in the face of stress. They sleep better too, their nervous system's able to truly stand down during the night because they carry a fundamental sense that the world is, generally speaking, a safe place. This secure attachment doesn't require perfect relationships or absence of all danger. It's more about an overall sense that we can handle what comes, that we have resources internal and external to draw upon, that comfort is accessible even in difficulty. The cozy aesthetic that's become popular in recent years, this embrace of hygge and soft spaces and gentle lighting, isn't just a design trend. It's a collective reaching toward feelings of safety and comfort that seem increasingly elusive in a complex, fast-paced world. When we create comforting environments, we're not being indulgent or escaping responsibility. We're satisfying genuine psychological needs just as real and important as our need for food and water, our need to feel safe and held and protected as we navigate the vulnerabilities inherent in being human. Section 3: Memory, Nostalgia, and Emotional Regulation, the comfort of what was. There's a particular kind of peace that comes from remembering. Not the frantic searching for a forgotten name or the anxious review of a past mistake, but the gentle, warm reverie of nostalgia, when memory becomes a soft place to rest. Psychologists have discovered that nostalgia isn't just sentimental longing but serves important psychological functions, particularly in helping us regulate our emotions and maintain a sense of continuity in our ever-changing lives. The word nostalgia itself, coined in the 17th century by a Swiss medical student named Johannes Hofer, originally described a medical condition, a pathological homesickness suffered by soldiers and students far from home. But our understanding has transformed dramatically. Modern research reveals nostalgia as a predominantly positive emotion, one that enhances well-being rather than diminishing it. When researchers ask people to recall nostalgic memories in controlled studies, participants consistently report increased feelings of social connection, enhanced sense of meaning in life, and greater optimism about the future. Memory, it seems, doesn't just record our past but actively shapes our present emotional state. The neuroscience of nostalgia shows activation in brain regions associated with both reward and emotional processing. When you recall a cherished memory, your brain's reward centers light up with activity, releasing dopamine just as they would in response to other pleasurable experiences. Simultaneously, regions like the hippocampus retrieve the stored memory, while the amygdala adds emotional coloring, and the prefrontal cortex helps you reflect on the memory's meaning. This isn't simply replay but active reconstruction, your brain weaving together fragments of sensation, emotion, and meaning into a coherent narrative that feels like reliving the moment but actually represents creative synthesis of multiple memory traces. What makes nostalgia particularly soothing is how it tends to emerge in response to negative mood states. Research has found that people spontaneously experience nostalgic thoughts when they feel lonely, bored, or anxious. This isn't coincidence but a sophisticated emotional regulation strategy built into how memory systems interact with mood. When present circumstances feel difficult, the mind reaches back to times when we felt safe, connected, loved, successful, happy. These memories don't erase current challenges, but they provide perspective, a reminder that difficult moments pass, that we've experienced goodness before and can experience it again, that our lives contain more than just this present struggle. Studies examining the content of nostalgic memories find they're overwhelmingly social. People remember times with friends and family, relationships and connections, shared experiences and mutual understanding. This social focus makes sense given our fundamental nature as social beings. Connection to others represents one of the most powerful sources of well-being and resilience we possess. When we nostalgically remember times of connection, we're essentially reminding ourselves that we belong, that we matter to others, that we're not alone even if we feel isolated in the present moment. Brain imaging studies show that nostalgic memories activate regions associated with social cognition and theory of mind, the capacity to understand others' thoughts and feelings. In remembering past connections, we're essentially rehearsing and reinforcing our social cognition networks. The relationship between nostalgia and meaning in life reveals another dimension of memory's power. Psychologists define meaning as a sense that life is comprehensible, significant, and purposeful. Nostalgia contributes to all three aspects. Nostalgic memories help us construct a coherent narrative of who we are and how we came to be this person. They remind us of significant relationships and experiences that have shaped us. They connect our past to our present and future, creating temporal continuity that anchors identity across time's changes. Research has shown that inducing nostalgia through writing exercises or evocative music increases people's reported sense that life has meaning, and this boost in meaning helps protect against existential anxiety and death awareness. Attachment theory, which we touched on earlier, provides additional insight into how nostalgia functions differently for different people. Those with secure attachment patterns, who generally trust in the availability and responsiveness of important others, tend to have nostalgic memories rich in themes of love, support, and connection. Their nostalgia amplifies positive emotions and strengthens social bonds even in memory. Those with more insecure attachment patterns may experience nostalgia differently. Research finds that avoidantly attached individuals, who learned early to suppress needs for closeness, tend to have nostalgic memories focused more on personal achievement and autonomy rather than relationships. Their nostalgia can still be positive but emphasizes different themes reflecting their particular attachment strategies. The sensory triggers of nostalgia reveal how deeply embodied memory truly is. A particular scent, perhaps your grandmother's perfume or the smell of rain on summer concrete, can instantly transport you to another time and place. This happens because the olfactory system connects directly to brain regions involved in emotion and memory, bypassing the filtering that other senses undergo. A specific song from your adolescence, even one you haven't heard in years, can resurrect the feelings and atmosphere of that period in your life with startling immediacy. These sensory doorways into memory suggest that nostalgia isn't just mental but whole-body experience, emotion and cognition intertwined with physical sensation. Digital technology has created new dimensions of nostalgic experience. Social media platforms like Facebook regularly present us with memories from years past, photos and posts we'd likely never have otherwise retrieved. This digital nostalgia serves similar functions to naturally arising nostalgia, increasing feelings of social connectedness and life meaning. But it also raises questions about memory's authenticity and spontaneity. When algorithms curate our past for us, selecting which memories to resurface, we lose some agency over our own remembering. Yet research suggests that even these prompted nostalgic experiences can boost well-being, suggesting that nostalgia's benefits don't require complete spontaneity. The bittersweet quality of nostalgia, its mixture of pleasure and loss, represents perhaps its most distinctive feature. Nostalgic memories acknowledge that the recalled moment has passed, that we cannot literally return to that time. This awareness of loss coexists with pleasure in the memory itself, creating an emotional complexity that simple happiness or sadness doesn't capture. Some researchers argue that this bittersweetness actually enhances nostalgia's regulatory power. By acknowledging loss while savoring memory, we practice accepting life's inherent impermanence while still valuing positive experiences. This acceptance of temporal flow, of the reality that all moments pass, can reduce anxiety about the present moment's impermanence and increase our capacity to savor current experiences even as they unfold. Nostalgia also functions as what psychologists call a social resource. When we share nostalgic memories with others, particularly others who were present for the remembered events, we strengthen current bonds while honoring past connections. This shared remembering creates intimacy, acknowledging joint history and mutual understanding. Families often build strong connections through shared nostalgic stories told repeatedly at gatherings, stories that remind everyone of their belonging to something larger than themselves. These narrative rituals serve important psychological functions beyond entertainment, creating and maintaining social identity across generations. Interestingly, nostalgia appears to be universal, found across cultures and throughout human history. Ancient texts from thousands of years ago describe longing for the past, suggesting this isn't a modern phenomenon but a fundamental feature of human psychology. Different cultures might emphasize different aspects of nostalgia or find it triggered by different stimuli, but the basic phenomenon seems to be part of what it means to be human, to be a creature who remembers, who can hold past and present simultaneously in awareness, who can draw comfort from what was even as we live in what is. Section 4. Social connection and belonging, the psychology of being understood. At the deepest level, humans are not isolated individuals but fundamentally social creatures. This isn't just philosophical observation but biological reality, evident in every system of our bodies and brains. Our nervous systems, our immune function, our cognitive development, our emotional regulation, all of these depend profoundly on connection with others. Understanding this interdependence can be deeply soothing, a reminder that our needs for relationship and belonging aren't weaknesses to overcome but essential features of our design. The research on loneliness and social isolation paints a stark picture of what happens when these connection needs go unmet. Chronic loneliness produces stress responses comparable to physical pain, elevating cortisol and inflammation, increasing risk for cardiovascular disease, weakening immune function, and even shortening lifespan. These aren't abstract statistics but measurable physiological changes that demonstrate how deeply we need each other at the biological level. But the flip side of this vulnerability is equally important. Positive social connections produce measurable benefits to health and well-being. Strong relationships literally help us live longer, recover from illness faster, maintain cognitive function as we age, and experience greater happiness throughout our lives. The hormone oxytocin, which we've mentioned before in the context of comfort, plays a central role in social bonding. When we hug someone we trust, when we laugh with friends, when we share vulnerable feelings and receive empathy in return, oxytocin releases in our brains, reinforcing the bonds that sustain us. This neurochemical reward system for connection isn't accidental but evolutionarily crafted. Our ancestors who formed strong social bonds were more likely to survive and reproduce, protected by the group against predators and environmental threats, cared for when sick or injured, supported in raising vulnerable offspring. We carry the legacy of that social selection, nervous systems that crave and reward connection. But here's something fascinating that makes the need for connection even more flexible and accessible. Our brains don't always distinguish sharply between real and imagined social connection. Research on parasocial relationships, the one-sided connections we form with fictional characters or media personalities, reveals that these relationships can provide genuine psychological benefits. When you feel soothed by listening to a favorite podcast host, when you find comfort in rewatching a beloved TV series, when you feel understood by a book's narrator, these aren't lesser or fake connections but real neurological events. Your brain releases oxytocin, your stress levels decrease, your sense of belonging increases, even though the other party in this relationship doesn't know you exist. This finding isn't meant to suggest that parasocial relationships can entirely replace real reciprocal connections. They can't. But it does mean that there are more pathways to feelings of connection than we might assume. In moments of loneliness, the voice of a trusted author or podcaster can provide genuine comfort. The familiar characters of a favorite story can feel like companions. This accessibility of connection, even in solitude, represents a beautiful feature of human imagination and our social brain's flexibility. The concept of social baseline theory suggests that our brains actually treat the presence of trusted others as the default state, the baseline from which we operate. When we're with people we trust, our brains don't have to work as hard to regulate emotion and cope with stress. The presence of others literally shares the cognitive and emotional load, making challenges feel more manageable. This is why holding a loved one's hand can reduce pain perception, why talking through a problem with a friend makes it seem less overwhelming, why we instinctively seek others when we're scared or hurt. We're not designed to cope entirely alone, but to rely on our social networks as distributed cognitive and emotional resources. Psychologist Barbara Fredrickson's research on positivity resonance reveals another dimension of connection's power. Fredrickson found that moments of genuine positive connection with others, what she calls positivity resonance, produce immediate changes in nervous system function, synchronizing the physiological states of the people involved. When two people share a warm, authentic moment, their heart rates may synchronize, their breathing may align, their facial expressions may mirror each other. This biological synchrony creates a form of connection beyond words, a felt sense of being on the same wavelength, truly met and understood by another person. The need to feel understood runs particularly deep in human psychology. When someone truly understands us, grasping not just our words but our underlying feelings and intentions, it satisfies something profound. Psychological research has found that feeling understood predicts relationship satisfaction more strongly than many other factors. It's not enough that others are physically present or even helpful. We need them to see us accurately, to comprehend our internal experience. This need for understanding explains why good listeners are so treasured, why we gravitate toward people who get us, why validation and empathy feel so healing even when they don't change our external circumstances. Social connection serves as what psychologists call a buffer against stress. Life inevitably brings challenges, losses, disappointments, threats. These stressors have less impact on people who have strong social support networks. The presence of caring relationships doesn't prevent bad things from happening, but it does mitigate their impact on our well-being. This buffering effect works through multiple pathways: practical help with problems, emotional support and validation, distraction and positive experiences that balance difficulties, and enhanced coping through shared perspective-taking and problem-solving. Our relationships literally build resilience into our psychological system. But here's something that might seem counterintuitive. Even thinking about supportive relationships can provide benefits. Studies have found that mentally reminding yourself of people who care about you can reduce stress responses and increase feelings of safety. This suggests that connection's power isn't entirely dependent on real-time interaction but can be carried within us as an internal resource. The secure attachment we develop through positive relationships becomes part of our psychological structure, accessible even when we're physically alone. We internalize the care we've received, creating what psychologists call internal working models of relationships that guide how we approach connection throughout life. The role of physical touch in connection deserves special attention. Humans are tactile creatures, and gentle touch communicates safety and caring in ways that transcend language. Research has shown that even brief touch, like a hand on the shoulder, can reduce stress, increase helping behavior, and enhance feelings of trust. Massage reduces cortisol and increases oxytocin and serotonin. Hugging someone we care about for just 20 seconds produces measurable changes in stress hormones and immune function. These effects aren't merely psychological but deeply physical. Our skin's nerve endings directly connected to brain regions governing emotion and social bonding. During the isolation imposed by recent global events, many people reported deep hunger for physical connection, a reminder that while digital communication can partially fulfill social needs, it doesn't entirely replace face-to-face interaction and physical presence. Yet we also discovered creative ways to maintain connection despite physical distance, demonstrating human resilience and adaptability. Video calls, while not identical to in-person interaction, activated similar brain regions associated with social connection. Written messages expressing care and concern provided genuine comfort. The rituals we created, like virtual gatherings and physically distanced outdoor meetings, served important psychological functions even as they highlighted what we'd lost. The diversity of connection types matters too. We need different kinds of relationships for different purposes. Close, intimate relationships provide deep support and understanding. Casual friendships offer pleasant interaction and shared activities. Acquaintances create a sense of community and belonging in our daily environments. Professional relationships contribute to identity and achievement. Each type of connection plays a role in our overall social health. This explains why even introverts, who may find social interaction draining, still need relationships, just perhaps fewer or different types than extroverts who gain energy from social engagement. Group membership and collective identity represent yet another dimension of belonging. Being part of groups, whether families, friend circles, teams, communities, or organizations, satisfies our need to belong to something larger than ourselves. This isn't about losing individuality, but about finding our individual place within meaningful collectives. Research on collective emotions shows that shared experiences with groups, like cheering for a team or participating in rituals or working toward common goals, create powerful bonding and boost well-being. We are simultaneously unique individuals and members of various groups, and both aspects of identity contribute to psychological health. Section 5. Perception, Time, and Consciousness, the Flexible Nature of Awareness. One of the most fascinating discoveries in psychology and neuroscience is how much our conscious experience depends not on the world as it objectively is, but on how our brains construct reality from the information available to them. This might sound abstract or philosophical, but understanding it can be deeply calming because it reveals the flexibility and creativity inherent in consciousness itself. Consider time perception, something we usually take for granted as fixed and external. Yet psychological research has thoroughly documented that time's felt passage varies dramatically depending on our state of mind and what we're paying attention to. When you're bored, minutes feel like hours. When you're engaged in something absorbing, hours feel like minutes. When you're in danger, seconds seem to stretch out, allowing detailed perception of rapidly unfolding events. When you're having fun, time flies. These aren't just metaphors but descriptions of genuine differences in subjective temporal experience. Differences that emerge from how attention and memory work together to construct our sense of duration. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying what he called flow, a state of consciousness where people become so absorbed in an activity that everything else falls away. In flow, self-consciousness disappears, time transforms, action and awareness merge into seamless doing. Athletes describe it as being in the zone. Artists speak of the work flowing through them rather than from them. Musicians experience time both slowing down, allowing extraordinary precision, and speeding up, hours passing in what feels like moments. These aren't rare mystical states available only to the exceptionally talented but natural capabilities of consciousness, states that arise when certain conditions align. Clear goals, immediate feedback, and a perfect balance between challenge and skill level. The neurological basis of flow reveals why it feels so different from ordinary consciousness. Brain imaging studies show that during flow states, regions of the prefrontal cortex actually reduce their activity in a phenomenon called transient hypofrontality. This temporary quieting of the prefrontal regions responsible for self-monitoring and time tracking explains several of flow's distinctive features. Without constant self-evaluation, that critical inner voice goes silent. Without active time tracking, hours can pass unnoticed. Without excessive prefrontal control, learned skills can express themselves more fluidly, the body accessing deeply ingrained patterns without conscious interference. Flow represents a state where consciousness becomes streamlined, focused entirely on the task at hand, stripped of the usual mental chatter that accompanies most of our waking hours. But you don't need to be an elite athlete or accomplished artist to experience altered states of consciousness. The liminal space between waking and sleeping, which sleep researchers call hypnagogia, offers its own fascinating window into consciousness's flexibility. In this drowsy borderland, you might experience brief hallucinations, hear voices or music that isn't there, feel strange physical sensations like floating or falling. These hypnagogic phenomena reflect the brain's transition from wake to sleep, when the usual boundaries between imagination and perception become permeable, when dream logic begins to infiltrate rational thought, when consciousness itself becomes liquid and strange. Thomas Edison famously used hypnagogia for creative problem-solving. He would sit in a chair holding metal balls, allowing himself to drift towards sleep while contemplating a difficult problem. As he fell asleep, the balls would drop from his hands and wake him, often with new insight into whatever he'd been considering. Recent research has validated this technique, showing that the sleep onset period particularly facilitates creative insight and novel associations. The brain in hypnagogia makes connections it wouldn't make during fully awake, rational thought, freed from the constraints of logical analysis and conventional thinking. This reveals something profound about consciousness. It isn't a single state but a continuous dimension with many possible configurations. Wake, sleep, and dreaming represent major states, but within and between these lie countless variations, each with distinctive subjective qualities and cognitive capabilities. Meditation practices deliberately cultivate specific states of consciousness characterized by heightened present-moment awareness, reduced narrative self-referential thinking, and sometimes profound peace or insight. Hypnosis can produce states of heightened suggestibility and focused attention. Intense aesthetic experiences, like being moved by music or art, produce their own distinctive qualia, their own unique patterns of consciousness. The malleability of consciousness extends to our most basic perceptions. Attention acts as a spotlight, illuminating whatever we focus on while leaving the rest in relative darkness. But this isn't passive illumination but active construction. What we attend to quite literally shapes what enters consciousness. The famous invisible gorilla experiment demonstrated this dramatically. When people focus attention on counting basketball passes, they often completely fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. This inattentional blindness shows that consciousness isn't simply receiving reality but actively creating it moment by moment from the vast stream of information constantly available to our senses. Even something as seemingly straightforward as the present moment turns out to be surprisingly complex when examined closely. What we experience as now actually integrates information from slightly different moments in time. It takes your brain a fraction of a second to process sensory information, so technically what you experience as the present moment is actually the very recent past, assembled and presented to consciousness as a unified now. This processing delay varies slightly between different senses. Visual information travels faster than tactile information, yet when you see yourself touch something, the sight and feeling seem simultaneous. Your brain adjusts the timing, creating temporal binding that makes the world feel coherent and synchronized even though the underlying neural processing occurs at different speeds. This constructive nature of perception extends to space as well as time. Your visual experience feels like a seamless, complete picture of the world before you, yet this is an illusion your brain creates. You actually only see sharply in a tiny area called the fovea, roughly the size of your thumbnail held at arm's length. Everything else in your visual field is much less detailed than it seems. Your brain fills in the gaps, using memory, expectation, and rapid eye movements to create the impression of complete, detailed vision everywhere you look. This isn't deception but efficient processing, your brain making intelligent predictions about what's likely to be there rather than processing every detail of every scene. The phenomenon of change blindness demonstrates this construction process dramatically. When researchers show people images that gradually change between viewings, people often fail to notice even major alterations like buildings appearing or disappearing, people changing clothing, or entire objects shifting position. This happens because our brains don't actually store complete detailed pictures of scenes, but rather schematic representations with attention-captured details. Unless we're specifically attending to the changing element, our brain simply fills in what it expects to see, and we remain oblivious to the change. These findings about consciousness's constructed nature might initially seem unsettling, as if we can't trust our own perceptions. But there's something deeply calming here too. If consciousness is flexible, if perception is creative, if our experience of reality involves interpretation and construction, then we have more agency over our subjective experience than we might have thought. We're not passive receivers of a fixed reality but active participants in creating our moment-to-moment conscious experience through where we direct attention, what we choose to notice, how we interpret ambiguous information. Mindfulness meditation practices work partly by revealing and transforming this relationship with consciousness. When you sit quietly and observe your thoughts and sensations without immediately reacting to them, you begin to notice the constructed nature of experience. You see thoughts arise and pass away like clouds in the sky. You notice how attention can shift focus, how the same sensation can feel different depending on your relationship to it, how much of your suffering comes not from sensations themselves but from your resistance to them or stories about them. This isn't escaping reality but seeing it more clearly, understanding the difference between what's happening and your interpretation of what's happening. The psychological concept of cognitive fusion describes how we often become so identified with our thoughts that we can't see them as thoughts at all. When you're cognitively fused, a thought like, "I'm a failure" doesn't feel like a thought but like a fact about reality. Diffusion practices help create space between yourself and your thoughts, recognizing them as mental events rather than literal truths. This shift in relationship to thinking can be profoundly liberating, reducing the power of negative thoughts not by eliminating them but by changing how you relate to them. Research on psychedelic experiences, which has resurged in recent years, provides another window into consciousness's extraordinary range. Under the influence of substances like psilocybin, people report experiences of ego dissolution, where the usual boundaries between self and world become permeable or disappear entirely. Time may lose its linear quality. Perceptions may blend across senses in synesthesia. Emotions may intensify beyond anything experienced in ordinary consciousness. While these are chemically induced states, they demonstrate that consciousness can configure itself in radically different ways than its usual waking patterns. The therapeutic benefits some people experience from these journeys suggest that occasionally experiencing consciousness from a dramatically different angle can provide lasting shifts in perspective and well-being. But you don't need psychedelics or even formal meditation to work with consciousness's flexibility. Simply noticing when you're lost in thought and gently redirecting attention to present sensory experience represents a subtle but significant shift in consciousness. Savoring a pleasant moment, really taking it in rather than rushing past it, alters consciousness in ways that enhance the moment's positive impact. Choosing to reframe a situation, looking at it from a different angle or considering alternative interpretations, exercises consciousness's creative capacity. The practice of gratitude offers a beautiful example of consciousness's flexibility. When you deliberately notice things to appreciate, Your attention spotlight illuminates aspects of experience that might otherwise remain in the background. This isn't denying difficulties or pretending everything is perfect. It's choosing to also notice what's working, what's good, what supports you. Research shows that regular gratitude practice produces measurable improvements in well-being, not because it changes objective circumstances, but because it changes what you pay attention to, and what you pay attention to quite literally shapes your conscious experience. Sleep itself represents one of consciousness's most dramatic transformations. As you drift off right now, consciousness gradually releases its grip on the external world, attention turning inward, thoughts becoming dreamier and less logical, the boundary between self and environment softening. In deep sleep, consciousness may recede almost entirely, leaving only the most basic awareness of the body's state. In dreaming, consciousness creates entire worlds from memory and imagination, experiences that feel completely real while they're happening despite their often bizarre content. Each morning, consciousness reconstructs itself, attention turning outward again, logical thinking resuming, the sense of self solidifying. This daily cycle of consciousness dissolving and reforming demonstrates its fundamental impermanence and flexibility. Understanding consciousness this way, as fluid rather than fixed, creative rather than merely receptive, can reduce anxiety about experience itself. When you know that how you feel right now isn't permanently fixed but represents a temporary configuration of consciousness that will inevitably shift, difficulties become more bearable. When you recognize that consciousness naturally moves through different states and qualities, you can relax into the flow rather than resisting it, trusting the process rather than trying to control every moment. Section 6. The psychology of nature and environments, our ancient connection to the living world. There's a reason why nature sounds, images of forests, and recordings of ocean waves so reliably help people relax. It's not arbitrary preference but reflects something deep in our evolutionary heritage, a profound connection between human well-being and the natural world that psychologists call biophilia. This term, literally meaning love of life, describes our innate tendency to seek connections with nature and other forms of life, a tendency rooted in millions of years of human evolution in natural environments. The biophilia hypothesis, developed by biologist Edward O. Wilson, suggests that humans possess an innate emotional affiliation with other living organisms and natural settings because our ancestors evolved in close contact with nature. Those who paid attention to environmental cues, who could read the landscape for signs of water or food or danger, who felt drawn to settings that supported survival, these individuals lived longer and reproduced more successfully. We carry the psychological legacy of that selection, nervous systems that still respond to natural elements even though most of us now live in built environments our ancestors never experienced. Research documenting nature's psychological benefits has accumulated dramatically in recent decades. Studies show that even brief exposure to nature reduces stress hormones, lowers blood pressure and heart rate, improves mood, enhances cognitive function, and increases feelings of vitality. These effects appear across cultures and age groups, suggesting they reflect fundamental features of human psychology rather than learned preferences. One famous study found that hospital patients recovering from surgery healed faster and required less pain medication when their room had a window view of trees rather than a brick wall. The mere sight of nature, even through glass, supported the body's healing processes. The mechanisms behind nature's restorative effects involve several interrelated processes. Attention restoration theory, developed by environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, proposes that natural environments allow a specific type of attention they call soft fascination. Unlike the hard, effortful attention required by urban environments with their constant demands to monitor traffic, navigate crowds, and process advertising, natural settings engage attention gently through inherently interesting elements like moving water, rustling leaves, birdsong, and changing light. This soft fascination allows the brain's directed attention systems to rest and restore themselves, reducing mental fatigue and enhancing subsequent cognitive performance. Natural environments also tend to have what the Kaplans call extent, a sense of scope and coherence that gives the mind room to wander. When you look across a landscape, your eyes and mind can travel freely rather than being constantly interrupted by walls and obstacles. This openness satisfies something deep in human spatial cognition, perhaps reflecting our evolutionary past when seeing far distances meant seeing potential threats or opportunities before they arrived. The relief of open views may operate below conscious awareness, your nervous system relaxing in response to visual information that suggests safety and space. Water holds particularly powerful psychological significance for humans. The presence of water, whether ocean, lake, river, or even fountain, consistently attracts people and produces calming effects. Evolutionary psychologists suggest this reflects water's fundamental importance to survival. Our ancestors needed reliable water sources, so being near water signaled safety and resource availability. Modern humans, still carrying these ancient associations, find water inherently soothing even when we no longer depend on local sources for survival. The sound of water, especially rhythmic sounds like waves or rainfall, may also entrain brain activity, encouraging the slower rhythms associated with relaxation. The concept of prospect and refuge explains another aspect of natural environments' appeal. This theory suggests humans prefer settings that offer both prospect, the ability to see far and observe surroundings, and refuge, places to hide and feel protected. Think of the universal appeal of a comfortable chair by a window, or a secluded beach cove with views of the ocean, or a campsite at the edge of a clearing beside the forest. These settings satisfy ancient needs to simultaneously monitor for threats and have somewhere safe to retreat. When environments provide both prospect and refuge, our nervous systems can relax, vigilance needs satisfied by the setting's features rather than requiring constant active scanning. Colors in natural environments produce distinctive psychological effects. The greens and blues dominant in nature particularly promote calm. Research on color psychology has found that green, associated with vegetation and growth, produces feelings of harmony and balance. Blue, the color of sky and water, evokes peace and tranquility. These color preferences appear to have evolutionary roots. Green signals the presence of vegetation, which indicates water, food sources, and suitable habitat. Blue sky signals fair weather. Our psychological responses to these colors may reflect ancient associations between specific environmental cues and survival conditions. Fractal patterns, the self-similar patterns that repeat at different scales throughout nature, offer another source of nature's restorative qualities. Tree branches, coastlines, clouds, mountain ranges all display fractal geometry. Research has shown that viewing fractal patterns reduces stress and promotes mental restoration, with fractals in the moderate complexity range, similar to those found most commonly in nature, producing the strongest effects. Some researchers speculate that our visual systems evolved to efficiently process natural fractals, so encountering these patterns feels easy and pleasant, requiring less effort than processing the geometric patterns of built environments. Natural sounds provide their own benefits. Research on soundscapes has found that natural sounds like birdsong, wind in trees, and flowing water enhance mood and cognitive performance while reducing stress. These effects occur even when people aren't consciously paying attention to the sounds, suggesting they operate on automatic, possibly unconscious levels of processing. In contrast, mechanical sounds like traffic noise and construction increase stress and impair concentration, creating chronic low-level irritation that accumulates over time. This explains why nature sound recordings have become so popular for sleep and relaxation. They're not just masking unwanted sounds, but actively promoting calm through their inherent acoustic qualities. Biophilic design applies these principles to built environments, incorporating natural elements into architecture and interior spaces. Features like natural light, indoor plants, natural materials like wood and stone, water features, and views of nature all contribute to spaces that support human well-being. Research on biophilic design in workplaces has found that these elements increase productivity, creativity, and job satisfaction while reducing stress and absenteeism. In healthcare settings, biophilic design accelerates healing and reduces pain and anxiety. Schools with natural elements show improved student attention and academic performance. Even small doses of nature provide benefits. A concept called micro-restorative experiences describes the brief moments of connection with nature that urban dwellers might encounter during their day. Noticing a flower growing through a sidewalk crack, watching clouds shift shape, feeling a breeze, observing a bird. These tiny moments of nature contact, while not equivalent to hours in wilderness, still produce measurable stress reduction and mood enhancement. The cumulative effect of many such micro-experiences throughout a day can significantly impact well-being. Gardening and caring for plants offer a particularly engaging form of nature connection. The act of nurturing living things, working with soil, watching growth unfold across seasons, all provide psychological benefits beyond mere exposure to nature. Gardening involves gentle physical activity, requires attention to the present moment, creates sense of purpose and achievement, and connects people to natural cycles and processes. Research has found that gardening reduces symptoms of depression and anxiety, improves physical health, and enhances life satisfaction, particularly among older adults. The Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, codifies intentional nature connection into a health practice. Rather than hiking with a destination in mind, forest bathing involves slowly wandering through forests, consciously engaging all senses with the environment. The scent of trees, the play of light through leaves, the texture of bark, the sounds of birds and insects. Research on forest bathing has documented impressive effects including reduced stress hormones, improved immune function, lower blood pressure, and enhanced mood. These benefits persist for days after the forest visit, suggesting that even occasional nature immersion can provide lasting effects. Interestingly, even representations of nature produce some benefits, though typically smaller than actual nature contact. Looking at photographs of nature scenes reduces stress more than viewing urban scenes or abstract images. Playing nature sound recordings aids sleep and concentration. Even virtual reality nature experiences show promise for stress reduction, particularly for people unable to easily access real nature. While these mediated experiences can't fully replace direct nature contact, they demonstrate how deeply ingrained our responsiveness to nature is, that even simulated natural elements engage our evolved psychological systems. The growing field of ecopsychology explores the relationship between human mental health and connection with nature at both personal and cultural levels. Ecopsychologists argue that environmental degradation and human psychological distress are interconnected, that our species' disconnection from nature contributes to modern epidemics of anxiety, depression, and meaninglessness. Reconnecting with nature, in this view, isn't just individually beneficial but culturally necessary, a way of remembering our embeddedness in the larger living world and our dependence on healthy ecosystems. Section 7. Creativity, Dreams, and the Unconscious Mind, the Wisdom Below Awareness. Beneath the surface of conscious thought lies a vast realm of mental activity that profoundly influences our behavior, emotions, and creative capacity. The unconscious mind, far from being merely a storage site for repressed memories as early psychoanalysis suggested, actively processes information, solves problems, and generates creative insights, often working on challenges even while our conscious attention focuses elsewhere or while we sleep. The relationship between creativity and unconscious processing has fascinated researchers for over a century. Countless creators across domains, from scientists to artists to mathematicians, have reported that their most innovative ideas arrived not through deliberate analytical thinking but through sudden insight, often during rest or sleep. Auguste Kekulé discovered the ring structure of benzene after dreaming of a snake biting its own tail. Dmitry Mendeleev saw the periodic table of elements complete in a dream. Paul McCartney heard the melody for Yesterday in his sleep so clearly that he initially thought he must have unconsciously plagiarized it from somewhere. These anecdotes are supported by systematic research on what psychologists call incubation effects. Studies show that when people work on a problem and then take a break or sleep before returning to it, they're more likely to solve it than if they work continuously. This improvement doesn't happen simply because they're refreshed, but because unconscious processing continues during the break. The unconscious mind appears particularly good at making remote associations, connecting ideas that seem unrelated at the conscious level but share deep structural similarities. This capacity for unexpected connection underlies creative insight. Modern neuroscience has begun to illuminate how this unconscious creativity works. Brain imaging studies show that during rest and sleep, the brain doesn't simply shut down but engages in what neuroscientists call the default mode network. This network, active when we're not focused on external tasks, allows different brain regions to communicate in ways they don't during focused attention. Memories get consolidated, recent experiences integrate with older knowledge, and novel combinations of ideas can emerge. The default mode network seems to function like an internal simulator, running scenarios, making predictions, and exploring possibilities without requiring conscious direction. REM sleep, that stage we discussed earlier where most vivid dreaming occurs, appears particularly important for creative insight and emotional processing. During REM, the brain's activity patterns resemble waking consciousness in many ways, with high levels of activity in emotion and memory regions, but reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex responsible for logical analysis and reality monitoring. This configuration allows the brain to make associations it wouldn't make during waking thought, combining elements in novel ways without immediately dismissing combinations as illogical or impossible. Dreams thereby serve as natural creativity workshops where the mind experiments freely with ideas, images, narratives, and emotional themes. The content of dreams reveals the unconscious mind's concerns and priorities. While Freud's specific theories about dream symbolism haven't held up to scientific scrutiny, his broader insight that dreams reflect unconscious mental activity remains valid. Modern dream research shows that dreams incorporate recent experiences, unresolved emotional issues, and persistent concerns, processing them in the brain's unique nighttime mode. Recurring dreams often relate to unresolved conflicts or persistent stressors, the mind repeatedly returning to difficult material as if trying to find a resolution. But dreams aren't just problem-solving or emotional processing. They can also be sources of meaning, creativity, and even transcendent experience. Some dreams carry the quality of significance, feeling deeply meaningful even when their content seems strange or symbolic. Jung spoke of big dreams that touch archetypal themes, dreams that feel like they come from somewhere beyond personal experience and speak to universal human concerns. Whether one interprets such dreams psychologically, spiritually, or as fascinating brain phenomena, they can provide valuable insights and inspiration. Lucid dreaming, the state where you become aware you're dreaming while the dream continues, offers a fascinating bridge between conscious and unconscious mind. Research shows that about half of people experience lucid dreams at least once, and some can learn to induce them with practice. Lucid dreamers report being able to make decisions within dreams, explore dream environments with intention, and sometimes even shape the dream's direction. This conscious awareness within the unconscious state reveals that the boundary between conscious and unconscious isn't absolute but represents a continuum, and consciousness can extend into normally unconscious territories. The creative potential of hypnagogic and hypnopompic states, those transitional zones between waking and sleeping we mentioned earlier, deserves deeper exploration. In these states, the mind becomes extraordinarily fluid and associative. Random thoughts and images flow without logical constraint. Distant concepts connect. Novel metaphors emerge. Symbols gain unusual potency. Many creators deliberately work with these states, training themselves to capture the ideas that arise there before they dissipate in full waking consciousness. Salvador Dali famously used a technique similar to Edison's, maintaining awareness while drifting towards sleep to access surreal imagery for his paintings. The concept of cognitive unconscious extends beyond creativity to encompass all the mental processing that occurs outside awareness. Your brain constantly monitors your environment, recognizes patterns, retrieves relevant memories, and prepares action plans without requiring conscious attention. When you drive a familiar route while lost in thought and suddenly realize you've arrived without remembering the journey, your cognitive unconscious handled the driving. When you recognize a face before consciously identifying the person, unconscious processing accessed memory faster than conscious retrieval could occur. When you feel instinctively uneasy in a situation before consciously identifying why, your unconscious detected subtle threatening cues your conscious mind missed. This unconscious competence reveals how much your mind does to support you without requiring conscious effort or awareness. You're not consciously directing your heart to beat, your lungs to breathe, your digestive system to process food, your immune system to fight infections. You're not deliberately regulating thousands of homeostatic processes that keep your body functioning. Vast unconscious intelligence maintains your life continuously. Recognizing this can be deeply comforting, a reminder that you're supported by systems you don't have to consciously manage, that your organism knows how to care for itself in ways that far exceed conscious understanding. Intuition represents another manifestation of unconscious processing. That gut feeling, that sense of knowing without knowing how you know, often reflects rapid unconscious pattern recognition based on accumulated experience. Research on expert intuition shows that people with deep domain expertise can make accurate, rapid judgments that appear instantaneous but actually draw on extensive unconscious knowledge. A chess master glances at a complex board position and instantly sees the strong moves. An experienced clinician meets a patient and intuitively senses what's wrong before conducting formal examination. A skilled social observer reads subtle body language and tone cues that reveal emotional states others miss. However, intuition isn't always reliable. Unconscious biases, stereotypes, and heuristics can also influence intuitive judgments, sometimes leading to errors. The key is learning when to trust unconscious processing and when to engage deliberate conscious analysis. Generally, intuition serves well in domains where you have extensive experience and regular feedback. In unfamiliar domains or situations where biases might distort judgment, slower analytical thinking works better. Understanding this distinction allows you to work with both conscious and unconscious processing optimally. The practice of free association, central to psychoanalysis but useful beyond therapy, demonstrates how accessing unconscious material can provide insight. When you start with a word or image and let your mind wander freely, following whatever associations arise without censorship or logical connection, surprising connections often emerge. Feelings you didn't know you had surface. Memories you'd forgotten return. Patterns across seemingly unrelated experiences become visible. This technique works because it temporarily loosens conscious control, allowing unconscious material to rise into awareness. Journaling and expressive writing provide another way to access unconscious processing. Research on expressive writing shows that writing about emotional experiences produces measurable health benefits, reducing stress, improving immune function, and enhancing psychological well-being. Part of this benefit comes from organizing chaotic experience into coherent narrative, which helps the brain process and integrate difficult material. But part may also come from accessing unconscious feelings and insights that remain unavailable to conscious thought alone. Writing can surprise you, revealing thoughts and feelings you didn't know you had until they appeared on the page. The relationship between letting go and solving problems illustrates how sometimes conscious effort can actually impede progress. When you're stuck on a problem and struggling to solve it through focused thinking, continuing to push often produces diminishing returns. Your conscious mind gets locked into particular approaches, unable to see alternatives. But when you release conscious effort and do something else, allowing unconscious processing to take over, solutions often spontaneously emerge. This isn't giving up, but strategically engaging a different mode of processing better suited to certain types of problems. Section 8. Self-compassion and acceptance. Being kind to yourself. One of the most powerful psychological resources for well-being is also one that many people find surprisingly difficult to access. Self-compassion, the practice of treating yourself with the same kindness, care, and understanding you'd offer a good friend. Research by psychologist Kristen Neff and others has demonstrated that self-compassion powerfully predicts psychological health, happiness, resilience, and life satisfaction, often more strongly than self-esteem. Yet many people find self-criticism far more natural than self-kindness, having internalized harsh internal voices that constantly evaluate, judge, and find them wanting. Self-compassion has three interconnected components according to Neff's research. The first is self-kindness versus self-judgment, treating yourself warmly and understandingly rather than harshly when you encounter pain, failure, or inadequacy. The second is common humanity versus isolation, recognizing that suffering and imperfection are part of the shared human experience rather than signs that something is wrong with you specifically. The third is mindfulness versus over-identification, maintaining balanced awareness of painful thoughts and feelings rather than either suppressing them or becoming overwhelmed by them. The self-kindness component directly counters the harsh self-criticism that plagues many people. When something goes wrong or you make a mistake, self-criticism activates threat and defensiveness systems in the brain, releasing stress hormones and creating emotional pain on top of whatever difficulty triggered the criticism. This makes problems feel worse, not better. Self-kindness, by contrast, activates the mammalian caregiving system, releasing oxytocin and creating feelings of safety that allow you to acknowledge difficulties without adding unnecessary suffering through harsh judgment. You can care about doing better without attacking yourself for not being better already. Research comparing self-compassion with self-esteem reveals important differences. Self-esteem often depends on positive self-evaluation and comparison with others. It rises when you feel good about yourself and falls when you face failure or criticism. Self-compassion, however, remains stable across circumstances because it doesn't depend on evaluation at all but on the commitment to treat yourself kindly regardless of how you're performing or what others think. When self-esteem fails, during times of struggle or inadequacy, self-compassion actually becomes more accessible because it's designed for exactly those moments. The common humanity component addresses the sense of isolation that often accompanies suffering. When something painful happens, we easily fall into feeling alone, as if everyone else has life figured out while we're uniquely struggling. This perception increases suffering, adding loneliness and shame to whatever difficulty we face. Recognizing that all humans struggle, that imperfection and pain are universal rather than personal defects, reduces this isolation. You're not broken for finding life hard sometimes. You're human. This recognition doesn't minimize your particular pain but places it within the larger context of the human condition, which can be oddly comforting. Studies of self-compassion across cultures find that it predicts well-being universally, though different cultures may express it somewhat differently. In more interdependent cultures that emphasize group harmony over individual achievement, self-compassion may manifest as forgiving yourself for letting others down. In more independent cultures focused on personal achievement, it may involve accepting your limits and being gentle with yourself about goals. Despite these variations, the core principle remains the same: treating yourself as worthy of care regardless of circumstances or performance. The mindfulness component of self-compassion means neither suppressing painful feelings nor becoming completely absorbed in them. Instead, you acknowledge difficult emotions with balanced awareness, neither denying their presence nor letting them entirely define your experience. This balanced approach allows you to process emotions without being overwhelmed, to learn from difficulties without becoming stuck in them. Mindfulness creates psychological space, a little distance between you and your thoughts and feelings that allows response rather than reaction. Paradoxically, self-compassion actually supports motivation and personal growth better than self-criticism does. People often fear that if they're kind to themselves, they'll become complacent or self-indulgent, that harsh self-criticism is necessary to drive improvement. Research soundly disproves this fear. Self-compassionate people actually show greater motivation to learn from mistakes, more persistence after failure, and more realistic assessment of their strengths and weaknesses compared to self-critical people. Self-compassion provides the emotional safety necessary to honestly acknowledge shortcomings and work on them, while self-criticism often leads to defensive self-protection and avoidance. The practice of self-compassion can be developed through specific techniques. One involves the self-compassion break, a brief exercise where you acknowledge your suffering, remind yourself that suffering is part of human experience, and offer yourself kindness through words or gestures. Another technique involves talking to yourself as you would a dear friend, imagining what you'd say to someone you care about in your situation and then saying those things to yourself. Writing a self-compassionate letter to yourself about a difficulty can also be powerful, allowing you to externalize the kind perspective before internalizing it. Physical self-soothing gestures support self-compassion practice. Research shows that gentle touch activates the parasympathetic nervous system, promoting calm and safety feelings. When you're distressed, placing a hand over your heart, holding your own hand, wrapping your arms around yourself in a gentle hug, or stroking your arm soothingly can activate the same soothing systems that respond to receiving care from others. These simple physical gestures trigger neurochemical responses that reduce stress and increase feelings of being cared for, even when you're providing that care to yourself. The relationship between self-compassion and acceptance deserves exploration. Acceptance, in psychological terms, doesn't mean resignation or approval, but rather acknowledging reality as it is without constantly struggling against it. When you accept that you're feeling anxious rather than berating yourself for anxiety or desperately trying to make it stop, you often paradoxically reduce anxiety's intensity. When you accept that you made a mistake rather than defending against this reality or spiraling into shame, you free up energy to learn and move forward. Acceptance isn't passive but active acknowledgement that creates space for effective response. Acceptance and commitment therapy, a modern cognitive behavioral approach, builds extensively on acceptance principles. ACT proposes that much psychological suffering comes not from difficult thoughts and feelings themselves, but from our attempts to avoid or control them. These control strategies often backfire, amplifying the very experiences we're trying to escape. ACT teaches psychological flexibility, the ability to experience thoughts and feelings without being dominated by them, while taking action guided by values rather than feelings. This flexibility allows you to feel fear and still move toward what matters, to notice self-doubt without letting it stop you, to experience sadness without drowning in it. The concept of experiential avoidance explains much unnecessary suffering. When we rigidly refuse to experience certain thoughts, feelings, sensations, or memories, we narrow our lives to avoid triggering these experiences. Someone who avoids all social situations to prevent anxiety never learns that anxiety is tolerable and temporary. Someone who suppresses all sad thoughts never processes grief and moves through it. Someone who avoids anything that might lead to failure never develops the resilience that comes from surviving setbacks. Acceptance breaks this pattern, making room for all experiences, which paradoxically often reduces their intensity and impact. Self-compassion supports acceptance by creating safety for acknowledgement. When you know you'll treat yourself kindly regardless of what you discover about yourself or your situation, you can afford to look honestly at reality. When you're locked in self-criticism, honest self-examination becomes too threatening. So you avoid it through denial, rationalization, or blame. Self-compassion provides the emotional security necessary for the courage that honest acknowledgement requires. Research on self-compassion's benefits continues to accumulate. Studies show it reduces depression, anxiety, and stress while increasing life satisfaction, emotional resilience, and sense of connection to others. Self-compassionate people cope better with difficult life events like chronic illness, divorce, and trauma. They show lower levels of perfectionism and fear of failure. They have healthier relationships, being more able to take responsibility for their role in problems without becoming defensively self-protective. They even show better physical health markers, possibly because self-compassion reduces chronic stress that damages health over time. Perhaps most important for sleep and relaxation, self-compassion helps you let go of the day's difficulties without adding extra layers of self-judgment and rumination. When you can acknowledge that the day had challenges, that you didn't handle everything perfectly, that you're doing your best in complex circumstances, you can release the day more easily. When you treat your tiredness with kindness rather than criticism for not having more energy, you allow rest. When you accept that racing thoughts are unpleasant but normal rather than evidence of something wrong with you, you can observe them without resistance, which often helps them settle more quickly. Section 9. Small joys and micro-moments. Finding peace in the ordinary. In our achievement-oriented culture that constantly directs attention toward big goals and major milestones, it's easy to overlook the psychological importance of small, ordinary pleasures. Yet research on happiness and well-being suggests that frequent small positive experiences predict life satisfaction more strongly than infrequent major positive events. The accumulation of tiny joyful moments, what psychologists call micro-moments of positivity, creates a foundation of contentment that sustains us far more reliably than occasional peaks of intense happiness. Consider the simple pleasure of that first sip of morning coffee or tea, the warmth spreading through you, the familiar comforting flavor, the ritual that marks the day's beginning. This micro-moment, repeated daily, provides far more cumulative pleasure than annual vacations or occasional major purchases. Yet we often drink our coffee while distracted, thinking about the day ahead, checking messages, rushing through it without really tasting it. When we actually pay attention, really savor that first sip, the experience becomes richer, more satisfying, more capable of setting a positive tone for the day ahead. The practice of savoring, actively attending to and appreciating positive experiences, amplifies their impact. Research by psychologist Fred Bryant shows that people who deliberately savor good experiences report greater happiness than those who simply have the experiences without actively appreciating them. Savoring can target past experiences through reminiscence, present experiences through mindful attention, or future experiences through anticipation. Each form of savoring generates positive emotion and enhances well-being, suggesting that how we relate to positive experiences matters as much as whether they occur. Micro-moments of connection with others provide particularly powerful boosts to well-being. A genuine smile exchanged with a stranger, a moment of eye contact that communicates mutual recognition, a brief friendly chat while waiting in line. These tiny social interactions increase positive emotion and sense of belonging despite their brevity. Research finds that even interactions with peripheral people in our lives, what social psychologists call weak ties, contribute measurably to well-being. You don't need intimate disclosure or deep relationship to benefit from human connection. Simple moments of mutual acknowledgement and friendly interaction support our fundamental social nature. The concept of prosocial spending reveals another source of small joys. Research by Elizabeth Dunn and colleagues shows that spending money on others generates more happiness than spending equivalent amounts on yourself. This doesn't require grand gestures or large sums. Buying someone a small gift, treating a friend to coffee, making a modest donation to a cause you care about, these small acts of generosity produce disproportionate increases in happiness. The boost comes partly from feeling effective and valuable, partly from strengthening social bonds, and partly from the warm glow of giving that appears to be inherent to human psychology. Gratitude, which we've touched on before, deserves deeper attention here. While major gratitude, thankfulness for life-changing events or crucial relationships, certainly matters, daily gratitude for small things may matter more for ongoing well-being. The cozy bed you sleep in, the food in your kitchen, the ability to read these words, the breath moving in and out of your lungs, hot water from the tap, the friend who texts to check in, the surprising blue of the sky at sunset. Noticing and appreciating these ordinary gifts shifts attention from what's lacking to what's present, from problems to resources, from complaints to contentment. Research on gratitude practices, like keeping a gratitude journal where you regularly record things you appreciate, shows consistent benefits for well-being, sleep quality, physical health, and relationship satisfaction. These benefits don't require identifying major blessings but accumulate through regular attention to small positives. The practice trains attention to notice good things that might otherwise remain in the background of awareness, gradually shifting your perceptual habits toward recognizing positive aspects of experience. Nature provides endless opportunities for micro-moments of beauty and wonder. A flower blooming in a sidewalk crack, clouds taking interesting shapes, the play of light on water, the intricate pattern of a leaf, birds going about their mysterious business, the smell of rain, the feeling of sunshine on your skin, savoring and mindfulness. As the day slowly fades away, take a gentle moment to savor where you are right now. Mindfulness is not about forcing the mind to be quiet. It is about softly noticing what already exists. The steady rhythm of your breathing, the calm weight of your body resting, the quiet awareness that, in this moment, nothing else is required of you. Savoring is the art of allowing simple experiences to linger just a little longer. Peaceful thought, a comforting sensation, a feeling of safety in the stillness of the night. When we give attention to these small experiences, the nervous system begins to relax naturally, without effort. Why small things matter. So often we believe that peace must come from big changes or major life events. But science and psychology show us something different. The mind is deeply shaped by small, repeated moments. Calm breath taken slowly. A gentle thought allowed to pass without judgment. A brief pause where nothing needs to be solved. These moments may feel insignificant on their own, but they quietly shape how the brain learns to feel safe, grounded, and at ease. The accumulation of peaceful moments. Peace does not arrive all at once. It builds gradually through the accumulation of many small, gentle experiences. Each peaceful moment becomes a signal to the brain that rest is allowed. Tonight, you do not need to chase sleep. You only need to allow these moments to collect, one by one, until relaxation becomes effortless. As this journey comes to a close, allow yourself to remain in this calm space for as long as you need. There is no rush to move forward. No expectation to do anything else. If this gentle exploration brought you comfort, you are warmly invited to return again. Deep Science Sleep is here to offer peaceful stories, calming reflections, and soft science-based ideas designed to help your mind unwind naturally. If you feel called to do so, consider subscribing to the channel. It allows these quiet moments of rest and curiosity to find you whenever you need them most. For now, simply rest. Let the mind drift, and allow sleep to arrive in its own time. Good night.